It's time to go beyond the headlines, cause I don't put in overtime just so I can headline, okay. Now it's Fox Sports, I'm live with Renee. Going hard every day, sports rapping every play. Different segments for your favorites, coming at you daily. With positive vibes, yeah, we some game changers. Basketball, football, soccer, with different interviews, you never know who may pop up. Listen, only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington.
We are well into the college football season, so joining us this week on Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington to dive into what happened this past weekend, we've got national college football reporter for The Athletic, Chris Vannini. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. This past weekend, we saw some great results. I mean, number 2 LSU beat number 9 Florida. Penn State beat Iowa by 5. And then we also saw an upset that had a lot of college football fans surprised happily or surprised depressed. And that is Georgia losing to South Carolina. What an upset as they lost in overtime by 3. What do you take away from this loss by the Bulldogs?
Yeah, Georgia came into this year as a team a lot of people predicted to make the college football playoff, and they beat Notre Dame early in the season and have generally been a strong program, but the offense has been a bit of an issue at times, and that really is what killed them against South Carolina. The quarterback Jake Fromm threw 3 interceptions. One of them was an interception return for a touchdown, and South Carolina pulled out the win in double overtime after some missed field goals and some strange decisions on both sides. So now Georgia has its first loss, and its hopes of winning the SEC and making the playoffs are now a bit tougher.
Absolutely. And you talk about the offensive struggles. That's something that definitely stood out. They have been plagued by injuries, and we saw that in the game versus the Gamecocks. We also saw, a lot of different rotations and combinations in the offensive line. I mean, how do you think, with them having one of the strongest offensive lines in college football, to see how weak they looked and how exposed they were, I should say, how do they move forward from this as they are trying to make it? You talk about bowls and postseason. They're trying to get there. They're a team that has been predicted to be a top team, and to lose their first game of the season to South Carolina, that is tough to bounce back from. So how do they take this loss and move forward from it?
Yeah, well, Fromm will have to be better. He hadn't thrown an interception all season, I believe, and has generally been good taking care of the ball. But when you have him throwing the ball 51 times, as he did, that's generally not going to be a recipe for success. I mean, DeAndre Swift, running back, at 23 carries for 113 yards. I mean, Georgia ran more than 90 plays, but to run more than 90 plays and only end up with 17 points is a real problem. And the turnovers were obviously an issue, but there's been a lot of consternation about very conservative play calling. And when Georgia has a lead, they try to just sit on it. And you saw not a lot of urgency against South Carolina, who was leading for most of that game. Mm-hmm. And you just kind of didn't get that sense that Georgia was really pushing to change the tide of things. They end up tying the game late and before it goes into overtime. So coaching is certainly a place a lot of people are questioning right now at Georgia after that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you saw them with a season low, just over 4 yards per attempt. They gave up a season high of 3 sacks in the game. I mean, I know a lot of people, as you mentioned, the urgency component, that was huge to me. You have to find a way to get points on the board, and the score just 17 and not really adjust as the game is going on. I know there were a lot of people I was talking to that were like, it didn't even look like they were trying to win. Almost looked like they gave the game away. Like there was no urgency, no moment where you saw them kind of scrambling to figure things out and change things. It just kind of seemed to be the same issues over and over again with turnovers and just a tough offensive game. So do you take that more as an ineffective player, that their injuries are really exposing them?
I mean, I think the injury. Yeah, I mean, I think the injuries are not great, but South Carolina is a team that you should take care of, especially at home, since they're already down to their backup quarterback, Ryan Helinski, who got hurt in the game. So it was the third-string quarterback, Joyner, who ended up coming in by the end throwing 12 passes, running 6 times, and he was eventually the guy who technically, I guess you would say, led them to victory. So, South Carolina is a team that Georgia should be able to handle, and that was absolutely not the case. And, South Carolina was up early and up for most of the game until Georgia tied it late.
Yeah. Well, with a loss, Georgia's now 10 in the recent rankings that came out the AP poll. But we also have a team that is in the top 20 and has their best start to the season since the 80s, and that's SMU. And you've been following along with them as well, throughout this college football season. How impressive are they looking right now as they prepare to take on AAC conference foe Temple this upcoming weekend?
Yeah, SMU coming into the year, you thought there was a chance that they might have something really good because they'd added a number of transfers, and Shane Buechele, the former Texas quarterback, coming in as a grad transfer. It looked really sharp in fall camp, and there's a lot of skill talent at SMU. Just kind of needed to know if they're going to put it together. And they have. They're 6-0 ranked, first time since the 1980s, first time since the team was hit with the death penalty in the late 80s, and kind of the program was wandering around for 3 decades almost. And they're the only undefeated team left in the American Athletic Conference right now. They've got 5-1 Temple coming in this week, and things have been going well for Sonny Dykes. They had to make a 21-point comeback in their most recent game against Tulsa and win in, I think it was triple overtime. So they were able to make a big comeback and get that win, and now go into a huge matchup this weekend.
Yeah, and they have, you mentioned head coach Sonny Dykes. He is in his second full season with the team. They are overperforming at what all or most preseason predictions were, and it seems like now people are jumping onto the Mustangs bandwagon. Now they see them at 6-0, but is it really Shane Buechele and the combination of everything coming together? I know it's still early in the season, 6-0. There's still a lot of football to be played, but do you think that the reason behind this early success is the fact that they just had the right mix at the right time?
Yeah, it's been partly the offense has been very strong. Buechele is the best. His numbers are tops in the conference, and James Prochet and Reggie Roberson are really good receivers, and Xavier Jones is a good running back. But the defense has also been much improved. They were, I think, 100 in the 100s in the rankings and scoring defense last year. That's up to, I think, in the 60s. So they've gone from what was not a great offense to defense to more average, which is a pretty big step up. You throw that in with the improved offense and what they're able to do on that side, and you've got a great mix for a team that'll lead you to undefeated and wins against Arkansas State and TCU, which they already have. Yeah, that definitely makes complete sense to me. When you have one of the top offenses in the country, they're ranked as high as number 12 as of this past week, and then you look at the fact that their defense has improved. That's a recipe for success. But looking at the rankings this past week, we still have Alabama at number 1, LSU at number 2. As you mentioned, Georgia is now at 10, Clemson at 3, Ohio State at 4, Oklahoma at 5. Are there really any teams you expect to crack? I will even say this top 10, but definitely the top 5 as we get into the later part of the season. Any changes that you're expecting as we get into the heavier part of the season? Yeah, Alabama hasn't really been tested yet. They will be soon. They've still got to play LSU and Auburn, along with much of their SEC schedule. I actually have LSU number 1 coming off of their win against Florida, but I think Wisconsin is a team to watch. They've got 4 shutouts in 6 games, sitting at 6-0, the best defense in the country. They go to Columbus in a couple of weeks to play Ohio State, and I think that'll really tell us if Wisconsin is for real in this race, because I think Ohio State is. They look like one of the best teams in the country, and I think we'll get a real test for Wisconsin to see if they deserve to be in that in a couple weeks. And then Penn State as well. Penn State's got Michigan, they got Michigan State, they got Ohio State all coming up pretty soon. They're 6-0, and that's another team that has a chance to really move up.
Yeah, those are a couple games that I have circled on my calendar. The Penn State-Michigan game this weekend, and then Ohio State-Wisconsin game the following weekend. Because, again, you talk about being 6-0. There's that added pressure now with each game that you win. if you are going to lose a game, as we saw with Georgia dropping their first game this past weekend, who's it going to be? That's the underlying question. It's very hard to go undefeated throughout the season. We've seen it happen in the past, of course, but I guess it is always a matter of who's going to lose first and who are they going to lose to. So are there any teams that you kind of are keeping an eye on right now that maybe are doing, like you talked about SMU, that are performing better than you anticipated coming into the season?
Yeah, Minnesota is 6-0, and with their next two games, I believe, are Rutgers and Maryland. So there's a very real chance that Minnesota could be 8-0. And at the beginning of the year, they kind of barely escaped some games against Georgia Southern, Fresno State, South Dakota State. But they have really turned things on in the last 3 weeks. They've rushed for more than 300 yards against Illinois, and then did the same to Nebraska in I think a 34-7 win. So Minnesota has really rounded into form in head coach P.J. Fleck's third year, and they will have a chance to, I think, compete in that division. Most of their toughest games will come in November, so we'll really get to see that at the end. But Minnesota has quietly been doing what it needs to do, and the next two games should be certainly winnable, and we may be talking about 8-0 Minnesota in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that definitely is possible. So now I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
All right.
If you had to pick the end of the season, your top 5 teams based on what you've seen so far this season, of course, injuries can happen, things can change. I'm talking strictly as of mid-October right now, so a lot could definitely change by the time we get to the end of the season. Seeing how teams are performing now, how they're coming together on their offense, defense, special teams, who would you have as your top 5 in order?
Top five what I think at the end of the year?
Yeah?
Yeah, so I have the same – currently I have the same 4 playoff picks that I had before the season. That is Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, Ohio State. Those are the 4 I picked at the beginning of the year. Sticking with those 4 for now. If I have to go for 5, maybe LSU. I think LSU is a really good team, but they have to play at Alabama this year, and I won't believe LSU gets over that hump until I see it. I'm picking Alabama to win that game, but I think LSU is a really good team, so maybe LSU at number 5.
Okay. We'll see. We'll hold you to it. Yeah, so far so good. So, well, Chris, thank you so much for joining the show this week to share your thoughts on the college football season so far. It's an exciting time as we're getting deeper into the fall, watching the season unravel and seeing how it's all playing out. So thank you for joining us to share your thoughts on what you've seen, and where can our listeners follow you on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Chris Vannini, ChrisVannini, and all my work is on The Athletic. And I recommend your listeners give us a try. Subscription site's only about $3 a month, and it's been going well for The Athletic. More than 600,000 subscribers now, and I hope your listeners can get on board with that.
Absolutely, and they should be. They're true sports fans. But, Chris, thank you again, and I look forward to seeing if your predictions come true. No pressure.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.